All right, good evening and welcome to this presentation of the Sacramento housing element. I am going to start screen sharing and have the document up in just a moment. So hang on. So this is part 2, and I'm sorry for the typo there on the T. Going a little fast this afternoon. There was already a part 1 introductory that was mostly about a part of land and woodbine. And I've since had time to do a little bit more work and develop part 2, which has more information about the Meadowview and Pocket areas and the South Natomas and North Natomas areas. But I also should say that the housing element has not yet been adopted by the Housing and Community Development Department. It is currently with the Housing and Community Development Department for their analysis, and it won't become a part of the 2040 general plan until they approve it. So I checked with the HCD today to ask about the status and to find out what was going on with the housing element. And I was given a bit of a legal disclaimer to share with you because Erica Jaramillo, who is with us this evening, wrote an article that was published this weekend that I shared with the HCD. And they wanted to make certain that we understood that the city is not responsible for the numbers shown in several areas of that article. Well, all of the numbers in the article by Erica come from me. So the legal disclaimer is also for me. So this author, whether or not I agree with the numbers in the housing element, the city was not responsible for this projection. And I wanted all of the viewers to be aware of this also, because if Erica needed to be aware of it as the author of an article about this, then so do I, and so do all of you. So with that being said, the housing element is part of, when it's all done, when it's all approved, part of the 2040 general plan update. And one of the statements in the 2040 general plan update is the exclusion of lower cost housing types. For example, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes prevent lower income residents from moving to neighborhoods with the best parks, schools, and other desirable amenities. Allowing a greater array of housing types in Sacramento residential neighborhoods will help create more equitable and inclusive neighborhoods by addressing the remnant forces of government policies of exclusion and racial segregation. Then the 2040 vision statement guiding principle number 4 says, cultivate a broad mix of housing types in all residential zones throughout the city to provide options for residents of all income levels while protecting existing residents and communities from displacement. So we want to keep this in mind as we go through the information that I gathered mostly from the sites inventory of the housing element. But before we get into the sites inventory, a few basics. One, Sacramento has a RHNA goal already referenced by the HCD. The total regional housing needs allocation. RHNA is regional housing needs allocation for the next 8 years is to create 45,580 new housing units. And then this chart here gives you a breakdown of the price points. So affordable housing is typically extremely low or very low income. And you can see that about 23% of our RHNA is supposed to be in extremely low and very low. Affordable housing sometimes is defined as low income at 13.8%. So those two together create about 36% of our RHNA goal. Moderate income is about 18.7% of our RHNA goal. And above moderate is 44.5% of our RHNA goal. So I'm going to let you kind of soak that in for just a moment because this is an overall guiding principle. And as you can see down at the bottom, it says the source of this is the Sacramento Area Council of Governments Regional Housing Needs Plan for 2021 and 2029. Then a couple of pages over, there is another chart about infill. So there's a couple of different ways that the city can, couple of different categories of housing that the 45,580 will be made up of. One of them is through infill. And so this is a chart about infill expressly. And if you look at the very bottom dark gray line, the total units of infill that are currently being projected by the city of Sacramento are 26,794. So our total RHNA is 45,580, and the city's expecting 26,794 of that to be in infill around vacant and underutilized sites. So that's not breaking new ground, and that is not upzoning. That is working with existing buildings and filling in between existing buildings on vacant or underutilized parcels. So as you're kind of scanning down there, you might notice that some numbers are really big and some numbers are really small. And also I want, you know, we're going to address that in a moment, but I also want everybody to look at the far left column called the community plan area. So you can see a community plan area is Arden Arcade. That is not the neighborhood. That is a planning area that's defined by the city. Same with all of those. So, you know, Fruit Ridge Broadway might sound a little odd. That's because Fruit Ridge Broadway includes Oak Park, Tahoe Park, and everything east to Avondale, running roughly along Fruit Ridge and Broadway. It's a long, narrow one, and it goes across a couple of different council districts. None of these community plan areas are consistent with one council district. They kind of all mush just a little bit. But now that you're looking at this, let's break that down just a little bit more. What is this telling us about infill development? There are two low resource areas in the planning communities. One of them is the South area, South Sacramento planning community, which includes Woodbine, Meadowview, North Laguna Valley High neighborhoods. And of the 22,000 something units, 7,071 of those are expected for the South area. That's 15.5% of the RHNA goal. And looking over those, there are some of every price point, but the majority are in low income. Then if you look at the Fruit Ridge Broadway planning community, for infill units, it's projected 4,705 units, which is also 10.3% of our RHNA goal. Between these two plan communities is a total of more than 25% of our RHNA goal in these two plan communities. And the majority in the Fruit Ridge Broadway planning community is also going to be low income, or projected to be low income. Then let's take a look at some of the high resource areas indicated on in that chart, the infill chart. The pocket is projected for 71 units, and that is 0.16% of our RHNA. The majority of those are above moderate. Arden Arcade is projected for 2,700 of the RHNA goal, with a fairly good blend across the board. East Sacramento, about 1.1% of RHNA, the majority of which will be low income, and then Land Park at 1.5% of RHNA, with the majority of low income. So let's take a look at citywide. You know, that was some infill information about the different plan areas. But if we're talking about price points, because that's an important part of guiding principle number 4 and the quote from the general plan update at the beginning, let's examine the different price points citywide, just a large generalization. What's going on there? Citywide, there are 323 parcels identified for low-income housing in the housing element sites inventory of vacant or underutilized lots. There are about 568 total acres, and not that this has anything to do with actual zoning numbers, but just to get a sense of the density on those acres, it averages out to about 75.11. Now then, if you look through the columns of parcels that are designated for low income housing. 16,000 of them are for low income. 1,566 are for moderate, and none of them are indicated to have any above moderate price point units. Next, for the moderate income capacity, for infill, this is infill only, 573 parcels are marked for only moderate income housing, with a total of 346 acres and a rough density, approximate, not an exact zoning number, of 76 units per acre. So once again, the average density is very high. And of those 573 parcels, 0 of them are marked for any low income units. 0 of them are marked for any above moderate units. They're on those 573 parcels, 5,006 moderate income units are projected. What about no income capacity? Because that actually happened in the sites inventory. There are 364 parcels with no income capacity given. So that kind of is a bit of a wild card. But as you can see, most of them have a fairly high density, and there's about 164. So there's room here. There's question marks. There's some room for some differences, some different opportunities. Then let's talk about some areas of Sacramento for the rest of this presentation, because we've been talking about all of Sacramento. Now let's just focus in on 2 areas. And the 2 areas are North and South Natomas and Meadowview Delta Shores Pocket. So North and South Natomas are in the north, outlined in green, and the Pocket and Meadowview and Delta Shores are highlighted in the kind of lavender pink color towards the bottom. I picked these 2 for a couple of different reasons, but one of the nice reasons is South Natomas has a history of some very low resource areas, and North Natomas is a very high resource area. So we've got a high resource next to a low resource. And the same thing is true in the South area. The Pocket and the emerging Delta Shores are high resource, and Meadowview has a history of being low resource. So let's see what kind of infill development is projected through the sites inventory for these areas of Sacramento. In the sites inventory, the top 10 low income housing sites are the following. And the 7101 Indian Lane has the most number of projected low income units on its 9.23 acres. That's 693 units of low income housing with 230 moderate income units. The next 3 are actually, they've got the same address, but they are totally different parcel numbers, but they are adjacent. So basically 3501 creates a 15 acre section of land, which is projected to have around combined 1,300 low income units with no moderate income units and 0 above moderate income units. So the top 4 out of 10 are in the south area, and I'll tell you that that's in the Meadowview area. And then where you see a CC, that's Central City or downtown. And there's one more south area over on Franklin, and there's one more. FB is for Fruit Ridge Broadway. So that gives you a sense of where the largest low income housing developments are projected to be in the next 8 years. And I'll just give you a moment to soak that in. So considering the Meadowview area more closely, since so many of the large low-income housing developments are recommended for that area, there are 5 parcels on Meadowview Road, which are zoned C2 or residential mixed. Of those 5 parcels, 1,400 of them are projected to be low-income units. 0 moderate income units, and 2 that are above moderate income units. The other major east-west artery within Meadowview is Florin Road, and there are 43 parcels on or near Florin Road zoned for C2 or RMX, and 1,247 of those are for low-income units, 613 are for moderate income units, and 0 are for above moderate income units. And here is a map of the Meadowview area. Where there's a red X, there is either an existing or a projected low income parcel that has at least 30 units. It's projected for 30 units or more. Remember that Florin Road has 43 parcels marked for at least some low income housing. I'm not going to try to put all 43 on the map. It would just be a red line. But what you see here are where there are at least 30 units. And if I put a little blue circle around it, there are more than 600 low income units projected to go in that area. Notice that 2 of the blue circles are on the light rail line running through the south area. One is at Meadowview Road, and that's that 3 parcels that are create, basically 1,300 low income units all put together. And then the one in Woodbine at basically the top left blue circle in red X is the 7101 Indian Lane. So there is a high density low income housing project projected on that light rail line at both Meadowview and at Florin Road. And then Franklin Road also has a very large development projected that is over 600 units. So let's switch directions. That's the south area in low income housing. What's going on in the north area in low income housing? South Natomas has 5 parcels marked for low income housing. Notice that where there are these parcels that are marked for low income housing, there is no moderate and no above moderate income. The zoning on these parcels are all office business, that's the OB, or R3. Which allow for office businesses to be on the ground floor and housing units above. And R3, yeah, it's a complex situation, but I think you get the gist of it. But especially notice that combined they have 27.48 acres and create roughly just a little under 300 low income units and no moderate and no above moderate. So where exactly are these parcels? Here is the parcel map for this area. And all 4 of the 5 parcels are adjacent and right next to each other along I-80 and Northgate Boulevard. The 5th one, you can see kind of down towards the center bottom. I understand that the neighborhood has been fighting a homeless safe ground that was scheduled for the space in between the red X's. So you can see that there's kind of the hints of a plan just to create a low income or homeless complex right there along Northgate Boulevard at I-80, pressed up against the freeway. Let's take a look at North Natomas and their low income housing plan. These are all of the low income housing parcels listed in the site's inventory. And you can see that, actually they're all C2s or R3s. Some moderate income is mixed in there, but notice that some of the moderate doesn't have low or high. But while I was looking at this information, because I was just sorting now by C2, EC, or an R3 or an R4, I noticed that some of the parcel numbers are gosh darn awfully close to one another. And that made me curious again. So after doing another parcel search, I identified that 7 of those parcels are adjacent parcels. They all share a boundary somewhere, and they are also pressed up against I-5 just north of Natomas Middle School. So before we take a look at that map, take a look again at the numbers. Sometimes lower and moderate are mixed together, sometimes they're not. But wherever there's lower income, there is never above moderate income. These 7 parcels put together create about 171 acres. And it is projected by the city to have 1,004 low-income units and 843 moderate income units on the 171 acres of these 7 parcels. So let's take a look at the map of these parcels. The top one's a little funny, I know. It's a U with a line through it. That's because that parcel actually wraps around that V-shaped neighborhood. So the parcel on the right side is the same as the parcel on the left side, and they're kind of separated by the East Commerce Way. But I want you to know that's one parcel. And then you can see the other 6. Notice that they, once again, are pressed up against the freeway in land that doesn't look like it's ever been developed for residential or housing units before. But also notice the location of Natomas Middle School sharing a boundary with one of those units. So that's the low income housing in the south area and in the north area. Let's now look at the above moderate income, because where we've seen low income, there's never been any above moderate income. So where is the above moderate income? The top 10 sites in the sites inventory are as follows. And you can see that, oh, the first 3 are within the south area. Excellent. There are 2 within the Fruit Ridge Broadway area. And then there are 3 in North Sacramento. That's the NS, North Sacramento. And then there are 2 within North Natomas. And giving you a moment to kind of soak that in. And here's what's interesting about the top 3 sites. So you see that there's one on Burlington Way for 763 acres, or another one on Burlington for 13.82 acres, and the 800 Detroit Boulevard in the south area. Since the south area has had so much low income projected housing, I wanted to find out where these south area parcels are. And putting them into the county parcel finder, I got this. Those are 3 adjacent parcels along Cosumnes River Boulevard to the south of Meadowview. And wait a second here. That is like 1,200, 1,300 above moderate units, all going into large adjacent parcels along the same road. To the north, where you see the little red dots, those are some large low-income housing projects recommended for Meadowview. And then you can see very large above moderate price point developments being planned for Cosumnes River. Oh, also these parcels, if you look at that round loop that's right there, that is a heavy resource area for shopping, a brand new subdivision shopping center. It's got a Walmart, it's got a Hobby Lobby, it's got an In-N-Out and a Pollo Loco and a C's Candy and an Ulta Salon, and all kinds of wonderful resources are located at the western end of that loop. So this is looking like it's going to be turned into a very high resource area. So let's take a look at South Natomas by housing income level. There were so many above moderate price point parcels in South Natomas, I couldn't give you a nice screenshot of the spreadsheet. It just wouldn't fit on the page. So instead I did a breakdown like this one. And what's interesting about South Natomas is it makes it very easy to see where there's low income, it's zoned residential mixed, office business, or R3. And there are 19 parcels marked for low income housing in South Natomas. And of those 19 parcels on 42 acres, 522 of them are for low income housing with no above moderate and no moderate. Where moderate income is found in South Natomas is on RMX or residential 2B. There are 21 such parcels. And where there's a moderate price point, there are no low income and no above moderate. Where there's an above moderate income, it's zoned for R1 or R1A. There are 37 parcels zoned R1 or R1A in the South Natomas planning community. They're on 37.51 acres, and they are marked for 87 above moderate income units. Now, remember, there are some that don't have any price points, any income levels indicated. And in South Natomas, there are 6 parcels on 1.79 acres that are zoned RMX, OB, or C2. So based upon what we see here, if anything is developed on those 6 parcels, it's most likely going to be low income and maybe possibly some moderate income. Let's take a look at North Natomas. Now then, North Natomas above moderate income housing, I could get into a spreadsheet to show to you. But notice that where there is above moderate income capacity in North Natomas, it is all zoned R1 or R2. And where there is above moderate income capacity, there is absolutely no lower income capacity and no moderate income capacity. It looks like there might be some adjacent ones based upon the name. But for the sake of time, I'm just, we can kind of see that those are very close parcels. The major point here is what they're zoned, and that where it's R1 or, well, there's actually one parcel down there that's our residential 2B, and there's a couple that are the REs are more rural, but it's still a 1 zoning. That's the major point. What the zoning is, where there's above moderate, and where there's above moderate, there's no lower and there's no moderate. And then I took a look at the pocket, and the pocket didn't fit into a nice spreadsheet to show you, but here's a breakdown of the types of housing available in the pocket and by their zone. There are 2 parcels in the pocket projected for low income. And so that's 13 low income units on the 2 parcels. With on those 2 parcels, there will be no moderate price units and no above moderate units. Those low income ones are zone C for commercial 2 or for office business. In the pocket, there are no parcels indicated for only moderate income, not at any zoning. And then in the pocket, where there's an above moderate income, it's zoned R1 or R1A. There are 44 such parcels for a total of about 10 acres. And the city projects that 58 above moderate price point units can be placed on those 10 acres in the pocket. There is 1 parcel that is not marked for any price point, but it is zone C2. So if anything is developed on that parcel, it is most likely going to be low income. So I kind of, after reading all of this, I went back into the housing element and I found something that's basically expresses what I've just showed you in words. So you can see that there is a clear intention to create these patterns within this housing element. First of all, lower income sites. State law establishes a default density standard of 30 units per acre for lower income units in the city of Sacramento. Sites a half acre or larger with zoning or general plan land use designations that allow for development at 30 units per acre were generally included in the inventory as lower income sites. There are no residential parcels that are zoned for 30 units per acre. Most residential, if you're talking R1, are zoned for about 8 units per acre. Then moderate income sites, high density multi-unit zone sites less than a half acre but larger than the size threshold described below for a single unit lot were inventoried as moderate income based on the assumption that the site was too small to accommodate a subsidized lower income project, but large enough for a smaller market rate multi-unit development to be built. Sites zoned for lower density multi-unit development that were larger than about 7,000 square feet were also inventoried as moderate income sites. And then above moderate income sites with single unit or duplex zoning, so the REs, the R1s, the 1As, the 1Bs, as well as small sites in higher density zones ranging from under 2,400 square feet to under 7,000 square feet, depending on the zone, were categorized as above moderate based on the assumption that a single unit home would be the most likely to be built. And it's not just our housing element that's saying something to that effect. SACOG is also saying the same thing. And I pulled this from the House Sacramento 2040 General Plan webpage. And so if you notice at the very bottom right corner, it says image source SACOG. And so this is a Sacramento Area Council of Governments recommendation, projection, that larger apartments and missing middle and townhomes are attached products and would meet the needs of people making between $55,000 and $83,000 a year. A single family unit, it's recommended that the person purchasing that will make in excess of $124,000 a year. So when I went back to the housing elements and went to find out who was in the working groups for housing elements, I found that there was at least one representative from SACOG and at least one representative from House Sacramento. And we also, as we are considering all of this information, there's a few more things that are coming up that could change how this is administered. One is that SB 9 and 10 were just signed by Governor Newsom, and those are bills that allow property owners to apply to have the zoning for a residential parcel changed. It also there are also bills that kind of redefine what is allowable in an R1 parcel. On October 5th, 2021, the City Council Law and Legislature Committee was talking about approving infill developments by a ministerial process. And what that means, if you're not familiar with that language, is that in order to accelerate the development process, the city ministerial streamlines the work that the planning department does. So when a developer or a property owner brings in a plan for a new development on a parcel, there are parcels within the city where all that the planning department will do is look at the zoning. Does it stay underneath the height requirement? Does it stay within the number of allowed units? And does it stay within the allowed amount of setback? But that's all that the planning department will look at. So because it's supposed to speed up the process, and if it meets all of those criteria, then they go ahead and stamp the project and it will move forward. Then also tomorrow, the Planning and Design Commission will be discussing allowing a council call-up provision for land use entitlements. And what the call-up provision will say is, if the planning department makes a decision about a development, the city council has 14 or 15 days to call up that decision of the planning department and vote on it, either to overturn it or to keep it. So this is also important because it could allow for some developments to override the planning department if the city council decides to override the planning department's decision. So from the October 5th Law and Legislature Committee meeting, there was a picture of infill sites that are being considered for a ministerial review. And if you look closely at this map, a lot of the parcels in the south area and the north area that I already showed you on the parcel map are listed here. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I also had the privilege of speaking with some city planners last week about this information out of the site's inventory. And some of their responses are as follows, after viewing the information I've just showed you. They wanted us to know that a housing element is, a projection, but we're mostly just putting it on paper that the city can meet its RHNA goals. So I was told not to take any of this too seriously because it's mostly telling the HCD that and SACOG that we can meet the 45,580 goal. Also, that given all of the above, housing production is still at the will of the market. So the developers are going to have a say in how much of this is developed and how it is developed. They also gave me an AB 686 by Santiago. I have not yet had a time to look at that. If there are any legal eagles out there who can read that and tell me what it means, I would really appreciate it. It sounds like a fairly significant piece of legislation for what we're doing. And then the government code section 655.83.2C3 is, I believe, supposed to be related to AB 686. So it's kind of the local equivalent of AB 686, which sets the default density standard of 30 units per acre for lower income units in the city of Sacramento. In order to be 30 units per acre, most of those lots are zoned RMX, C2, OB, the ones that we already saw for the low income housing. The city also wanted me to know about programs such as the Mixed Income Housing Ordinance, which is up and coming, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. However, before that, I kind of want to take a look at the will of the market in Sacramento. This is a graphic taken from the October 5th Law and Legislature Committee meeting, showing housing production since 2006 in Sacramento. And the kind of dark gold green color at the top is above moderate housing creation. And the very bright yellow at the bottom is very low. And then there's kind of a greenish color and an orange color that kind of go in with that. Moderate is red, or red or teal. And if you look at that, you'll see that there's been a lot of moderate and above moderate built in the last 15 years. Very, very little low or very low. So when the market has a will, what the market builds is affordable, is not affordable, but it is moderate or above moderate. And then also I said I'd come back to the Mixed Income Housing Ordinance. It is currently being generated. It's in a economic feasibility analysis state right now. The analysis should be completed by this coming spring and should be voted on by the end of 2022. The way this was explained to me is that this ordinance will change the way some of the residential areas are zoned, allowing for some residential parcels to become 30 units per acre instead of 8 units per acre. But don't quote me on that. I will much rather wait to hear official. That is what I thought I heard in the meeting the other day. So please stay tuned. I have not done the entire city. So far, there is still a Central City community plan, an Arden Arcade community plan, and a Fruit Ridge Broadway community plan for me to look into. And those include the all-important commercial corridors of Broadway and Stockton Boulevard that I really want to take a look at, but they're big and they're going to take a lot of time. Additional resources, and this is our final slide. If you want to see part 1 or the introduction that I did a couple of weeks ago, you can find it at the YouTube link given. And Erica Jaramillo's article summarizing main points of part 1 and part 2 can be found at the Social Justice Politicore website at socialjusticesac.org. And she takes parts of part 1 and part 2 and summarizes them and creates a very elegant summary of what I've shown you today and what's in part 1. And I am going to come back here and set it up for Erica to say to us and have her talk for a moment about the response she's gotten to her article on this subject.
Hi, can you hear me?
Erica, are you there?
Yes,
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I shared this, on various social media platforms, and I had a response from a Cal Yimby person on Twitter that wanted to discredit Jennifer for being a part of the Save Sacramento neighborhoods, and for what I think is really important about how I responded to that specifically is the fact that I am a member of the Sacramento Tenants Union, and we do direct actions here in Sacramento to help tenants stay in their homes. Specifically, I've faced displacement from Oak Park, and was able to luckily relocate and stay in the neighborhood during the negotiations and stuff that was happening with the city in Aggie Square. And I think that if we're really going to try and fight to make sure that the city is allocating housing fairly and equitably, and that this housing is just not centrally located, just further south and further north in areas that have terrible air quality and no access to jobs, that we all have to work together. And that was part of my response to the guy from Cal Yimby, was that what we're seeing right here is data that is, you can't lie about it. You can't say that the numbers and the parcels and where everything is strategically placed is not what we see it to be. And so I really just think that we all need to be working together here on this in order to make things fair and equitable here in Sacramento.
Anything else you want to share with us?
No, unless I'm forgetting something specifically.
All right. Well, excellent. Just a second.